What if it's not a Merry Christmas this year? I was checking out of the gas station a couple days ago and I asked the gal behind the counter, "How's your Christmas shaping up?" And she said, "Well, today's my first day back to work since back surgery and my kids are just going to have to wait for Christmas this year." I think about my niece whose husband passed away this last summer. This will be her first Christmas without him. I think about friends who are recently separated or divorced, and this is their first Christmas in this new chapter of their lives. And I was also recently thinking about this pretty famous Bible verse. It says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, and his mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." And I'd heard that verse many times in my life, but honestly, I couldn't have told you where it was in the Bible or what kind of context it came from. So I was curious and looked it up. And it turns out it's from the book of Lamentations. It's Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. And I then began to look at the context for that very famous scripture, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end." The book of Lamentations is written after the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. Jerusalem is conquered by the Babylonians. The people are taken into exile. And so I just want to read you a little bit of the context that comes before that scripture, beginning in chapter 1, just a couple of selected portions, talking about this wonderful, beautiful city of Jerusalem. "She who was a princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks." And I wonder maybe if that's a season of life you're in right now, just weeping bitterly in the night with tears on your cheeks. It says, "Her pursuers have overtaken her in the midst of her distress." And when I think about that verse, pursuers overtaken her, like from a horror movie where the evil monster's chasing someone down the street at night and finally overtakes them. It says, "Her children have gone away captives to the foe." So her kids have become slaves as well. It says, "All her people groan as they search for bread." It says, "For these things I weep and my eyes flow with tears. For a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed." I was talking to a friend this last week who was just in a time of lament in his life because of the suffering that his kids were going through. It says, "My eyes are spent with weeping, my stomach churns, my bile is poured out on the ground because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. Because infants and babies faint in the streets of the city." Can you imagine that? In the city of your town, infants and babies fainting and dying. This is exactly what was happening in Jerusalem. "They cry to their mothers, 'Where is bread and wine?' They faint like a wounded man in the streets of the city. Their life is poured out on their mother's bosom." Children dying in the hands of their mothers in the horrible devastation in the city of Jerusalem after the Babylonians have conquered them. It says, "All your enemies rail against you. They hiss, they gnash their teeth. They cry, 'We have swallowed her. This is the day we have longed for. Now we have it. Now we see it.'" So the enemies of Israel just gloating over their suffering. It says, "In the dust of the streets lie the young and the old." Imagine that in your town. Bodies of young people and old people in the streets. And then it says, "My soul is bereft of peace, and I've forgotten what happiness is." That's the background. That's the situation into which we then find this verse, Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 24. "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope, that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, and therefore I will hope in him. If this is a Christmas for you this year that simply is not merry, this would be a scripture to go to. Call this to mind and have hope that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. Christ has come. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ is coming back. Therefore, we can hope in him. And I do hope you have a Merry Christmas.